Okay, so onto our June project. So we started off with a little bit of painting watercolour and gouache. That's the first session. So that was something like this sort of thing, or that one. They were the first week of June. And then last week I started on urban scenes, which I will carry on with like buildings and urban scenes. So that was the demonstration I started last week. I think one or two people found it a little bit challenging that, so I might do a very quick, simpler building demo, just to kind of re-establish. So I'll use this little building.
Could you get on?
That's my demo. So I'll do that in a minute. So that's that. The other thing is, for those of you that are interested in lino printing, I've brought the equipment in. So for future weeks, if you want to do any over the next couple of weeks, I'll leave that here and we can talk that over, or we can make plans.
Yeah.
I don't actually have any lino, so it would either mean putting in an order at the wholesalers, but if I did that, I'd need quite a big order of different things, or just maybe we'd get some locally or something like that, if you're interested. So if anybody's interested in the lino, we can start thinking about that this week or future week. Okay, so that's that. Well, we're talking about David Hockney. David Hockney died last week. He was one of my very, early influences, and somebody that, I've always admired. Thought was really quite amazing artist. So it brought me David Hockney's books in. If anybody would like to have a look at those. So that's that. Right. Okay. So that was last week's demo. The other thing I was going to do this week is looking at gridding. That's the thing I really want to do, is do a quick sort of demo of gridding. I do this demo pretty much every year. I've got a very slightly different take on it this year, but that might be useful for some people who haven't, anybody that hasn't seen that demo. Right, so think about, just to sort of really go over the basic principles of perspective, which is really that if something is close to you, it will appear bigger or longer than if something is further away. Okay, so if we look at this building, or a picture of this building, this particular edge here, this front edge, is going to be the closest edge, and that will kind of come in about here. And then that is much closer than, say, this edge or that edge. So if I drew these edges in, or these corners in, of the building, it would be probably about that long. This other corner, probably, I think it's slightly shorter, about that long. So that would give the, hiya, good to see you. So that would be the relative size of the corner. So what we know about buildings is that floors are generally horizontal, ceilings are horizontal, windows are vertical and horizontal, doors. So we have a tendency to want to make all these things like floor level, roof level, windows, we have a tendency to want to draw those in as horizontals. But because we're drawing illusions, and we're drawing this illusion of perspective, for all these corners to be these sizes, if we join the corners together to make floor levels and roofing levels, we end up with something more like that. So these all appear at different angles. Okay. So that's the main thing to sort of be aware of, that anything we know is horizontal, unless it's on our eye level. So in this picture, when I took this photograph, I think my eye level is probably up here somewhere. And we can tell eye level by where everything becomes horizontal. So if I look at these, obviously we've got an angle there, the bottoms of the windows are angled, and the tops of the windows are angled. This level between the two eaves of the roof are a bit angled. But probably about here, these window bars become horizontal. And you can also look at all these, if you look closely at this picture, it's brickwork. So these courses of bricks, they're all at an angle, come to here and then become horizontal, and then as you go further up, they become a steeper angle. So basically, you'll find that anything drawn on this front face, the angles will sort of fan out between here and here. So that's like a bit of knowledge to be aware of when you're trying to draw buildings. So basically, you don't want to be seeing like parallel lines. They all need to be slightly different angles. So I try and think of like a fan, and that all these will sort of fan out. Okay. So that's that bit. If I wanted to put this ridge in, I'll just draw the rest of the roof in. One easy way of getting that position, first of all, is if I just do a cross across here, so it's a little bit of geometry, just do that and that, bit of wonky cross. That should give me the midpoint between, well, visually, that will give me the midpoint. I can take that up, and then, if I then draw the roof in, that should appear in perspective, should look about right. If I just measured that distance and halved it, it would come over here, and one bit will be up like that, and this bit would be like, that'd be too steep, that'd be too shallow. So that gives us the right sort of look to the angle of that roof. And then I find the best way of getting the one at the back is to just kind of hold that angle there, take it across, and then just drop it back a bit, make it a little bit shallower. And that should then give you the right appearance to that back roof. There is a way of constructing it with, so what can happen is if I join these lines up, carry these lines on, they will converge in what they call vanishing points. So this high level is linked together by two vanishing points, one over here and one over here. I try to include it on the page. Quite often when you're drawing, they'll be way off the page. But basically, anything drawn on this side should link back to that vanishing point, and anything on this side should link back to this vanishing point. So you could literally get a long ruler, sort of do that, just kind of get them to fan out between there and there. All good so far? Not lost everybody. I know I've done this many times before, but sometimes it's good to have a little bit of a recap. So the windows, I'm just going to judge this by observation. So they can be like that. The bottoms going back to here, so have a little bit of an angle there. The tops going back as well, a little bit of an angle there. Okay, so that gives me those positions. And then the ridge of the roof comes back here, like that. So this is quite a nice photo. If you just want to kind of establish that in your mind, as it's quite nice steep angles, quite close. Basically, the closer in you are to a building, like a corner of a building, the steeper these angles will be. And conversely, the further away you are, the shallower these angles will appear. So just something to be aware of. So that's a little bit of a recap on that. We'll use this bit of paper again. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was gridding. So I've already found this photo and I've sort of gridded it out. So what I do is, with these photos, what I do to start with is I cut out the border. You can either cut it out or you could fold it over if you want, just to get rid of the white border. Because for gridding to work, we need this shape to be the same as the shape of the image. So if you get rid of the border, and then the next stage, move this over slightly. The next stage is to pop your picture and your either paper or your board so that this edge lines up with the top, this edge with the side. And then to make sure that this side to that side is the same ratio as this side to that side, we try a diagonal through here. So it might be that, say, this might be 3 units and this 2, and then this might be 6 units and 4 units. So they're in the same ratio. Just put a diagonal, so I've got about 4 of these little bits of diagonals or sticks. We'll just do that. So with this piece of paper, it's very the ratio is that this side is just very slightly wider than that to that. So this bit I don't really want, so that'd be the bit I'd get rid of. And if I'm doing the grid, I just want it in that section there. Is that all good so far? So it's a bit like, you know, sometimes I've seen people having a picture, let's say a square picture, and then they're trying to stretch it onto a shape like that. But the first thing to do is to make sure that this is the same shape as this. So if you've got a board that's slightly squarer, you've either got to chop a bit of the picture off to make it a bit squarer, or you could imagine a bit more on, you know, make it a bit squarer that way. Add a little bit more wall, or it might be a bit more road, or a bit more sky, something like that. Basically, get that the same shape as this. What I've done here, so to get the grid on, I've just folded this up into 4, and then I've done the same this way. So it's a very easy way of getting a grid. And then once you unfold it, you just mark the positions of the folds, and then just ruler over them. If you've got a really nice photo and you don't want to do that to it, you could just get a piece of paper the same size and then fold that up, and then maybe put your photo in a plastic sheet and then draw a grid on the plastic sheet, sort of transfer it. So anyway, that gives me an easy grid. And the nice thing about this is there's no measuring. I don't have to work out complicated calculations of halving this and thirding that. You know, it's just very easy, just fold it up. So I've got this the same shape. There's a couple of ways you could do this. The way I've always suggested has been to maybe get some strips of paper and have one for the width. So I'll cut that so that it's this wide. So that bit is scrap, I'm getting rid of that. And then another one for the length. Not sure the length of it. But basically you would just do the same, you just fold these bits up. That gives you quarters. You can then transfer those quarters on across like that. You do the same for this.
Simple when you know how. Yeah.
Sorry?
Simple when you know how.
Well, it is, it's so simple. It's just a piece of paper, fold it in 4. What could go wrong? The main thing is to get the shape, the same shape to start with. That's one way. Now I've got this book, last year I got this book about painting, and this chap, he's got this other way of doing it, which is actually even simpler, which is to draw diamonds. And so basically, if you do actually draw a diagonal on here, so you've got a choice now. There's 2 very easy ways of doing it. You can do that, and that to there. Whoops. Sorry, it's quite hard drawing on a wobbly board. There we go. So that gives me the midpoint. So you need to keep this horizontal and vertical. Try and I think that's fairly a bit scruffy, but that gives you quarters. You could then divide these up, and then the same here. So it's almost like an easier still method. And then you do the same up the top. Yeah. So you've got these even easier, I think. And then the idea then is, here we go. You know, whatever you've got, say in this particular, you know, basically you just draw away, you just copy from each bit. So you do have to do a bit of judgment. So within, say, that rectangle, this lintel across the door, that looks like it's just under halfway down. So I could draw that in there. And then coming in this way, there's a little bit of space there to the edge of the door. Then there's the top of the door frame. And then that comes in. It's a little bit, it's a little bit wider there than it is there. So it's basically going from rectangle to rectangle, taking your time. If it helps, you could subdivide these even more. either fold them in or draw more crosses. But it's a really good way, if you've got a complicated picture, transferring a complicated picture from one surface onto another, and expanding it in size. Most of my work I do outside, so I can't really do this sort of thing, but if I'm doing a commission or something like that from a photograph, I'll pretty much always do this, because it's the easiest and quickest way of getting something accurately from one surface onto another, on a, blowing it up in scale, particularly if you're going bigger.
I've seen grids actually with them now. You could actually see the grid through the painting.
Yeah,
and they
you
left
can,
the grid
yeah.
there.
Yeah, it's a really traditional way of working. You can look at Leonardo's drawings or any of the masters, and you'll see this technique being used, or some sort of variation of it, for hundreds and hundreds of years. I mean, nowadays you can get grids to go over your iPad, so there's different apps you can have, things like that with your phone pictures. And then you've just got to construct it on your paper or your canvas or your board. But yeah, if you wanted something accurately transferred, that's quite a good way of working. Or if it's got like really complicated subject, lots of figures and then other intricate things, that's a good way of breaking it down. So, okay, so a few different things to go on there. Okay.